6 days away from Saturday's election, Dallas City Council District 14, another competitive race. Philip Kingston running for a third term against attorney Matthew Wood. Here now, Kingston will defend his watchdog role, and Wood explains what he thinks the district faces.
I think I conduct myself very respectfully. What happens is when you make big changes on a city council like that, the people who benefited from the status quo get upset. And instead of dealing with the issue honestly, they start calling you rude. They did the same thing to Angela. They did the same thing to Laura Miller. It's a pattern.
Well, I think some of what's facing 14 is what's facing the whole city. We've got to get through this pensions crisis. And then as soon as we do that, we have to get to a bond package. We've got streets that need to be repaired. We have other infrastructure that's got to be fixed. And then I think the third thing is, how are we going to grow our city and grow our economy? We lack a middle income housing situation in our city, and we need to be working for that. And we need better neighborhoods and better fundamentals in our city.
Now to the big story in Dallas County politics. Will federal prosecutors retry Dallas County Commissioner John Wiley Price? Friday, a federal jury found him not guilty on 7 counts of mail fraud and bribery. The judge declared a mistrial on tax fraud charges. In studio, 2 men we go to for legal answers. Aaron Wiley in the red tie here, and Victor Vidal. Aaron, rather, is a former federal prosecutor, worked in that office. Not on this case, though. And Victor in the purple tie here is a defense attorney and a trial attorney here in Dallas. Gentlemen, thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.
Big question right off the top. Should federal prosecutors retry the commissioner on tax fraud? Aaron, we'll start with you.
That's going to be very difficult.
Why so?
Because when you start, if you're intellectually honest and you look at the bribery charges, a jury decided that they didn't buy the government's theory that the money that the commissioner failed to report came from a bribery scheme. So, from a legal standpoint, you no longer have the backbone for the tax case. You're saying that that money may have come from something else, and then you also had at least a certain number of the people that said, no, we don't believe that there was anything wrong with that money at all, so they bought the defense's story that the money was just loans back and forth between Neely and
it wasn't a bribe.
And let me piggyback on top of that and focus us on something that I think is important. The tax case was supposed to be the slam dunk. So if you cannot get the slam dunk or the layup and they hang up there, then I think, piggybacking on what Aaron said, they really ought to just close the case down, in my view.
It seems like neither side expected this outcome. None of the journalists, especially in our newsroom, expected this or predicted this too. Was it weak prosecution or strong defense? Aaron?
I think it was a combination of both. Some of it is circumstantial, and we've talked about this before, is that a failure to recognize that the landscape has changed.
Landscape in what sense?
And what I mean by that is that in the microcosm, if you look at the case against Fain, what was that? That said that a citizen lied to a law enforcement official. The credibility in this case fell to the side of the citizen. And that's important because, again, that is a microcosm of a macrocosm.
What we're seeing nationally in terms of the distrust of the government and law enforcement.
And the FBI didn't have even a recording to prove that. And it goes back to, we watched this case. There were no wiretaps in this case. We talked about the strength of the case. Was it a lack of evidence on the government's part, or was it just trouble in the courtroom and with Judge Lynn?
I think it was a combination of both. I mean, I think of, sometimes I like to analogize to the Bible. I think about a quote in Daniel where Belshazzar was found wanting many tekel parts, and you've been weighed in the balances and found wanting. The government's case was weighed and it was found wanting. It's not that these were not good prosecutors. There's a good prosecution team, but their evidence failed under the scrutiny of reasonable doubt or beyond a reasonable doubt. And then you had skillful lawyers who whittled down that mountain of evidence to what I call an anthill, coupled with the fact that the defense made a good decision to put on a very minimal case to keep the jury's focus on what the government did not do and how they came up short.
And I think that there's something to be learned from that, is that the government would have been better advised to have kept a narrow case.
Right.
Because they ended up losing credibility on their strong point, which was the tax, by doing too much. It ends up being confusing at the end of the day. that you had citizens that were not able to come to consensus on what should have been our easiest charge. And just to follow up with that, it is a difficult time for the Northern District of Texas from a law enforcement standpoint, because you have prosecutors that are in and out of court every day doing their job. And this has been the seminal question for the last 6 years, is what's going to happen with this case.
Look, you've been in that office. What will it be like Monday morning in the U.S. Attorney's office in downtown Dallas?
It's going to be difficult. I mean, it is. I know that Victor likes to quote the Bible. I'm a religious person, but I'm more of a sports person. I'm thinking about people that have a winning record. I think about the back in the day when the Patriots had an undefeated record and they went to the Super Bowl and they lost. Doesn't matter that you won all these other things and day in and day out that you do win. When all the cameras were there in the biggest case that you've had, you lost. And even if you weren't there, you feel the yoke of that on your shoulders.
And the yoke is huge because more than 9 times out of 10, they win these cases. The lights and cameras are on, and the prosecutors walking into the office Monday morning are the rare exception rather than the rule in one of the biggest cases we've seen in this area.
We'll see what happens on this case. Gentlemen, thank you guys very much. Aaron Wiley, Victor Vidal, thank you.
Glad to be here.
Thank you.